Our mistakes can be our best teachers. And so in today's video, I'm sharing 5 of my worst money mistakes that I've made over the past 17 years. And also not just my mistakes, but what I learned from them and how I flipped those around to be able to grow my wealth and make sure that I was making better decisions in the future, because mistakes are only valuable if we learn from them. And so otherwise, if we're just going to sit around and beat ourselves up, they're completely useless and we might just make them over and over and over again, versus if we learn from them, take them as our teachers, and then are able to grow as people, grow as individuals, grow with our finance skills from these mistakes. That's how we learn, because those painful moments are the ones that we're like, wow, I never want to go through that again. I never want to experience that again. That was awful. What do I need to change? What do I need to do differently? So that's what we're talking about in today's video. If you're new here, I'm Sarah Edens. I'm a finance coach, author, wealth mindset researcher, and I'm so happy you chose to join me today to work on your wealth mindset and your finance skills. Okay, so let's get into my top 5 mistakes that I've made financially. So the first one was not prioritizing my career, and particularly not prioritizing a career that would make good money. So this stretched all the way back to college, which it's a hard time in college because everyone's pressuring you to make up your mind about a major. Maybe you're watching this right now and you're there at that kind of crossroads of trying to figure out what to major in. Well, what I found when I was in school, I majored in history and Spanish. And what I found was that I had people telling me, you're never going to get a job with a history degree. You're never going to get a job. And I just didn't really put 2 and 2 together, because when you're in college, you're just so focused on grades and surviving your exams and hanging out with your friends and having a good time and growing up. And so it's really a challenging time. There's a lot coming at you. And so thinking about a job feels so far away right up until you hit graduation. And then you're like, well, great. Now I've got this 4-year college degree. How does that translate out into what am I going to do with this? And so that was the thing where at the time I just did not have a good, clear picture of how what I trained in school for was going to translate into what I did on the flip side of graduation. So had I the chance to go back and do it over again, I would have definitely done more research about what kind of income I was going to make in various jobs out of college that sounded interesting, and then which degrees I needed, kind of reverse engineer your career and your college majors, which degrees you needed to be able to get those jobs, or if you even needed a 4-year college degree. A lot of jobs these days don't require a 4-year college degree. It might be technical training, or it might be a 2-year associate. So I wish I had had that perspective when I was back in college. That would have really helped. Now, the other thing that I did was I spent the first 17 years of my working life as a military spouse. And while I was very happy to do that, one thing to know, if you're in the military, married to a military member, you know this already, but they move you around constantly. And so we were moving around every 2, sometimes 3 years, for years and years and years. And so it was very challenging for me to invest in my own career, because we were just moving so much that I was never anywhere very long. And on top of that, I don't know if it's as bad as it was back when I was going through this experience, but companies unfortunately discriminate against military members. I vividly remember being in a briefing for military wives at one of the bases that we moved to, and we just gotten there, and they said, when you go to job interviews, literally take off your wedding rings so they don't ask you about your spouse's job, because then what's going to happen is if you say, oh, my spouse is in the military, they'll be like, next. And literally they told us to do that, which is really sad, isn't it? I mean, I was like, I never did that because lying isn't really in my value system. So I just never did that. So I told people that my spouse was in the military, and I did not get hired for jobs for the most part. And it really was a problem, because corporations and businesses want you to be there for a while, and they want to know that they're investing in somebody that's going to turn around and make the money for a while, versus just investing in them for a year or 2 and then they're gone again. They don't really want that. So it was just a very interesting time in my life trying to get hired And then also too, just all the moves were just exhausting. And so by the time I got the house packed up, we moved and got unpacked, I often just didn't have the energy to try and job hunt on top of it. And so I got really good at budgeting while we were in the military. So that was a good thing. I mean, I got really good at being like, okay, this is the income we're working with, and I can't get hired to bring in more. And so here we are. And so I did learn how to get super good at budgeting. So that's the plus side of that. But yeah, it's easier now if you have a spouse who their job keeps them moving around, whether that's in the military or elsewhere. It's a lot easier to invest in yourself today because of online learning. Back when I was in my early 20s, there was hardly any access to online learning. There was hardly, I don't know if YouTube was even around. There was not much on the internet. There was hardly any online college degrees and training programs that were legit. And so the world has really changed in terms of online access. So it's much easier today than it was back then when I was going through that experience and just feeling so stressed and frustrated by that. But that's the two things that I really had learned from those mistakes in terms of, even when it's challenging, keep investing in yourself and your skill sets as much as is possible. Like, don't give up, even if you're going through a difficult time in your life. You're moving around a lot, maybe just keep investing in yourself as much as you're able to. And then also, when you're looking at going back to school or you're going to school for the first time, really focus on, okay, fine, here's this degree I'm looking at, but how does this translate into a job? What's the pay? Are people in that industry even hiring? For example, you look at tech right now. Now's not maybe the best time to be going into tech, since tech is doing so many layoffs at the moment. They did 360,000 layoffs in the tech sector alone last year. So you want to look at kind of the industry you're interested in working in, and then really focus on what you need to do for your skill sets and for your training to get into that industry that then will then support you. Because you want to make sure that you're not spending money or taking out student loans to get a degree or something that then you can't support yourself with. That's really, really important. And I think that gets missed, especially for a lot of folks who major in the liberal arts like I did, but how does that translate into a job? How does that translate into something that you can make good money and support yourself with? And while I loved studying the liberal arts in college, it definitely was a learning point for me. So that's mistake number one. Mistake number two is not getting into investing sooner. Now, this is something that I have started to change over the last couple of years. I've really started to educate myself about investing. I do a lot of investing now on my portfolio. The one I use is E-Trade. This isn't sponsored by them or by Morgan Stanley, but it's my favorite. And I've learned a lot just by doing research through all the tools that they have for investors over there. They have a ton of free data and research and resources that you can see to see kind of historical performance of a certain stock or a bond or a money market fund or an ETF, all the goodies that are over there on the stock market to get into. Now, what I found was that I didn't get into investing sooner because I grew up under the impression that investing was foolhardy. And I'm a very risk-averse person. And so I thought, well, I don't want to lose my money, so I'm not going to get into the stock market. Well, that is something that I am now fixing. And because what the thing is, if you're a savvy investor and you get invested into the right stuff, you have your portfolio structured in a way that's not too heavily balanced towards being too risky, owning, too many, say, like just straight up stocks and not enough bonds and cash and real estate investments and other things that you can hold in your portfolio. If you're too heavily weighted over onto very volatile assets, yes, you're maybe perhaps not going to do very well out of it. Definitely there's people that put money into the stock market and just promptly lose it all and have a terrible experience with it. But if you can have a balanced portfolio and kind of have a buy and hold perspective on your investments, if you consult an investment advisor regularly to be able to guide you on how to structure things, that's really very valuable for building your wealth. So that's all the things I'm doing currently, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm learning a lot. And it's something where, again, I'm taking this perspective of the money that I put into the stock market. I'm not putting money in that I couldn't just walk away from. If it all collapsed, that I would be, inconsolable or anything. So that's my perspective to investing. If it grows, great. If I lose it, I've got money in savings and I've got money in other assets. For example, I don't have all my money tied up in the stock market. You never want to have that. You want to have balance as you build your wealth. But that's something that I've really started to change. And a lot of that was just really educating myself about how investing actually works and the fact that you can be an investor but not be a super risky investor. And that was something I didn't know. So that's been a learning point for me. My third money mistake was not planning ahead earlier for retirement. So now, this is a pretty common mistake. In the US, the average age that most Americans start to save for retirement is 31. And so, but financial advisors across the board recommend that you start in your 20s. So, retirement when you're in your 20s can seem like so far off, and it can be really hard to get your head around how long it is out there before you're going to need that money. But the sooner you start investing and saving for your retirement, the better. So, that is definitely something that I wish I had done sooner, but it's something that I have corrected, and I'm definitely starting to make sure that we are putting a lot more into retirement than we had been. Now, the thing is, the later in life you start saving for retirement, investing for retirement, the more money you have to put in kind of a concentrated sum as you go on, versus when you start in your 20s, you can just invest a little bit over a longer period of time and you have longer to work with. So it's just really good to remember that if you're in your 20s, now is the time to start saving for retirement. You can start at any point in your life, obviously, but the sooner the better. My fourth money mistake was buying a camper. So we had a situation where we were moving with the military as usual, and I thought it would make our move a little bit easier if we had a camper so we didn't have to pay to stay in hotels, and we had somewhere to stay while we were hunting for rental properties and so forth. So it sounded like a good idea at the time. Now, what actually happened was that we got into a lot of debt over this camper, and then it turned out to be a total white elephant trying to resell it when we decided to sell it, which we promptly did because we realized that in the state that we'd moved to, it was just really not the right climate for camping. And so we were not having a very good time with that. We weren't getting out and using it at all. And so then we were like, okay, well, we'll sell this thing. Well, it took 2 years to sell this camper. In the meantime, I was paying, I think, 13% interest on the loan that we had taken out to purchase the camper. Plus, I was paying insurance on the camper. Plus, I was paying storage fees every single month to store the camper because we couldn't park it in the neighborhood we were renting in. So it just ended up being an absolute money pit. And then I finally sold it 2 years later at a huge loss. And it was just like, oh, thank God that's gone. So it was one of those experiences where if you're pondering buying a recreational vehicle, a camper, a boat, some of these different things like this, definitely go out and rent one first. And don't just rent one once, rent it a bunch of times and make sure you actually like camping, or that your family actually enjoys camping, or that you actually like boating, for example, because it's much better to rent something, try it out a little bit first and test the waters, so to speak, before you jump in and take out a big loan, because the resale value and the resellability of those recreational vehicles, campers, trailers, motorcycles, I would say go in this category, boats, things like that can just be very poor resale value, and there's sometimes not a great market for it depending on the timing that you're timing the market with and the area you live in and how much demand there is for those kind of things. But most likely you're going to lose money on it. So just make sure that if you do want to purchase one of these things, go rent it first and try it out. Make sure you like it before you bite the bullet. And then I would say also pay cash for it so that you're not there servicing a loan on something at the same time. That is one of those things that, because it's a discretionary purchase, definitely pay cash for it and don't finance it. That was something that got me into trouble. So I was just so happy when I finally sold that on. And then my fifth money mistake that I've made kind of is also something with wheels. It was buying cheap used cars in fairly poor condition just to try to save money. So I've always been very conscientious about not getting into too much debt in general. And so I was going through a phase where I was like, let's just pay cash for everything. Let's try really hard to stay out of debt. Let's not take out any loans we don't have to take out. So we were trying to do this with cars. Now, in the market that we were shopping in at the time, cars, especially used used cars were really, really expensive and there was a lot of demand for them. So as you can imagine, there were not that many used cars we could actually afford. And the ones that we could afford were in pretty bad shape. You know, you'd open the hood and you'd be like, oh, I don't actually want to see what's under the hood there. That is just a big oily mess that looks like it's never been maintained in its life. I had one that we would have to go out and jumpstart every morning to get it to go. And it had some kind of battery connectivity problem that wasn't fixable. What else did I have? I just had I went through like 4 or 5 of these cars in my early to my 20s and 30s where I was just trying to be really frugal. And so I'd be like, oh, well, we'll just get this car and drive it as long as it drives and then get another one. And I mean, one of my cars, I'm not even sure if the airbags would have deployed if I got in an accident. It was just a mess. So that's not something that I can recommend doing. So what I finally did about 10 years ago was I was like, never mind about this. I'm just going to take out loans for the things I really must take out loans for. And so I took out a loan on a brand new Mazda that was reliable and safe and had airbags that worked and everything was shipshape on that. And then I have just driven that loyal little car for the last 10 going on 11 years now. And that has been a really good fix, was just get the loan on the car, get a nice new dependable car, you know, nothing fancy. It gets me from point A to point B. Mazdas are great cars. I can highly recommend them. And unless they've changed anything about the way they're manufacturing them, I have had a great experience with mine at least. But do your research on Consumer Reports and on other car buying sites before you purchase a car, and just pick out something that'll get you from point A to point B, is reliable, is safe, gets good crash safety data, things like that. And then you can just pay that mortgage off and then be your mortgage. Yeah, you practically need a mortgage to buy cars right now. You can pay your auto loan off as you're able to. You can pay it off early if you want to. And then you'll have a nice, safe, reliable car to drive until it dies, which could be a long time. You know, I work from home, so I don't drive that much. So I just keep up with monthly maintenance and it works perfectly fine. So that was that shift that I made finally, of just saying some things at some points in your life, it's worth it to just take out the loan for, rather than to try to pay cash, because you might be compromising on your safety, for example, or you might just have really high turnover if you're just buying a bunch of like little old beaters, which is all my cars were, was just a bunch of little old beaters. It was like Hondas and Toyotas, and I think I had a little old Subaru that I drove till it died, and it had a ton of miles on it when I bought it and was leaking oil everywhere. It was just a mess. But those little old cars, I think all of us have them at one point in our lives, but at some point you get to the place where it's just not really cost effective anymore to keep going through those. And it makes more sense to just get a reliable new car and then just hold it a very long time and keep it maintained. So that's my 5 money mistakes. I hope that you're able to get some value out of those and hopefully avoid making those yourself. And those were things that really helped me learn some valuable lessons. And thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again soon in my next video.